I'm Alana. I'm the senior. Oh, now we're live, guys. We had a bit of a false start for our live. I'm Alana. I'm the senior director of marketing at Clearbanc, and I'm here with Sarah and Scott and Trent from the Common Thread Collective. We are going to break down the iOS 14 update for you. So we are going to give you everything you need to know, provide some easy wins, help you navigate these looming changes that are going to occur. Sarah, please take us through. What is the iOS 14 update? What does it mean for e-commerce businesses?
Sure. So the iOS update, really the big thing that's going to impact e-commerce businesses is what we call the ATT prompt, which is very similar to if you have an iPhone and you've seen the pop-up which says, allow this app to show your location services. Something very similar is going to be happening, but it's going to say, allow this app to track you, to track your data. And the reason this is a huge issue is because when people opt out of that and say, no, I don't want you to track my data, Facebook, for example, can then not attribute any action that you take on a website back to your advertising on Facebook. So a quick example of that is if I am running ads on Facebook, someone says, no, don't track my data. They click on my ad, they go to my website, they add to cart, initiate checkout, and then decide not to purchase. I have no idea what they did. I don't see any of that data. So this can be really impactful for advertisers because we use that, or we have been using that on a very regular basis in order to make decisions in terms of where are we putting our budget, what ads are working, what ads are not working, what audiences are working. It's also going to greatly impact the way that we can retarget because our retargeting audiences are going to shrink. So there's a lot of unknowns in terms of what this is going to completely look like. We don't have full visibility into that yet. Facebook's obviously responding, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing and planning to do, but that's kind of the basis of what it is.
Yeah, I think for us, like for our founders, the biggest thing is like attribution is just you're going to lose all that attribution. And I think one of the stats that really blew me away when I was reading about it initially was that, Facebook expects like 20 to 30% of people to opt in. I actually think that's even being like generous, right? Like it could be in the 15 to 20% range of people who are actually opting in. So, you're losing 70% of that attribution, or 70% of the people, you're losing attribution for them. So that's a pretty big deal. So, if you were an e-commerce business or, you were advising your clients, like what steps should businesses take to like prepare for these upcoming changes? Like what are the things that we can do right now to make sure that that happens?
Yeah, for sure. I think I can jump in on that one. So I think there's a few technical steps you can take. I think the first one, like on Facebook, is verifying your domain, which you do on the back end of the platform. And then there's another one that is prioritizing the events that the pixel tracks. So basically saying what is the most important. If you are tracking people, Facebook's going to be limiting the amount of events that it's tracking per person. At the moment, it's currently unlimited. So you need to go in and kind of prioritize what is really important for me to track. For e-commerce brands that we work with, like purchase is obviously the most important one for us. So that'll be at the top of our list. And then the last one is going to be setting up Facebook's, if you're on Shopify, it's going to be a conversion API, which is basically server-side tracking, which is going to help track purchases on the people we can track. So setting up those three things is really important. And then what we're doing for all of our clients is pulling their historical data and then tying that to Google Analytics last click data as well. So we kind of have a North Star as we use Google Analytics data to see, okay, how does our Facebook ROAS currently relate to Google Analytics? Because the way GA tracks is not going to change. So it's going to help us kind of navigate as this transition happens, as the data changes.
Yeah, so a big thing like Trent is saying is just understanding your data. We don't really know what the attribution is going to look like. Facebook's going to create their own kind of modeling. What we're trying to do on our end is how do we build substantial models that we think are accurate to old numbers and old ROAS terms that we were looking at of different CACs and these things like that, and then tracking it back to what is going to be standardized and what is stuff that we still be able to know and understand. And being that GA isn't going to change, that's going to be the safest number that we can create and have our own models, and then be able to be flexible and change and adapt to whatever the new models look like that Facebook's going to start putting out. So we're doing our best to kind of do our own due diligence. We want to help educate people that way. And we know it's going to change. It's going to be complicated. It could be messy. It could be 70%. It could be 50. But we're excited to be able to navigate this and be best in class for our clients, for anyone that's here on the live that has questions. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, and just shout out to people who are on the live. If you do have questions, please drop them in the chat. And if we don't get a chance to respond to them, make sure that you're registered, because we will reach out to you with some additional resources, both from CTC and Clearbanc as well. What are sort of the most common questions or concerns that you guys are getting from your clients right now? Like, I know when you were talking about the 8 event limitation, like for me, that's a big deal, right? Like only having 8 events, whereas before it was like, it was unlimited, right? And so in order to determine like what is the most important, it's, if we break that down a little bit, like if someone does not opt in, then it's just that first event that gets tracked. And so how are they determining which event is the most important for them? Like what is that, right? Because they seemingly are all important to you, right?
Mm-hmm. So just a little clarity on that. With the 8 events, just for anybody listening in as well, those are only the events on your website. So you are still going to get any events that are on Facebook. So you do get that on platform, like clicks, impressions, views, all of that. And then for the 8 events that you're defining on your website, for most of our clients, because they're in the e-commerce space, that's not a huge deal unless they have a lot of custom conversions that they're trying to do to track specific purchases of specific products. But for the most part, the 8 events are okay, because we're just looking at things like view content, add to cart, initiate checkout, and purchase. And to your point, when somebody opts out of tracking, if they go to your site and they view content, add to cart, initiate checkout, and purchase, but they've opted out, we will not get any of the events except for the purchase. And that is based on how the advertiser defines their priority of the events. And so most people, their priority would be purchase, we assume. However, we've also talked about experimenting with that so that we could get the data at a lower funnel event. But so it will be whatever event you define as your most important.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be different for everybody, right? Like it depends. And I think probably you have to play around with a little bit. And also based on that historical data you guys were talking about, like that will make a difference. We do have a question in the chat, and it is, was this a surprise for advertisers as location tracking was first to be limited and permissions-based? So do you think this was a surprise to advertisers? I mean, I think it was. I mean, a little bit.
I think this is something that's been kind of a long time coming, and a lot of people, we were just naive to it. We didn't want to admit or realize that it's going to change. I mean, if you think back to some of the GDPR stuff that was going on outside of the US, even some stuff that happened earlier this year with the kind of California limiting some of that. So I think this is something that was bound to happen. People just didn't want to acknowledge it. It's going to change the way we do things. I know I heard through Facebook's earnings report yesterday, Mark Zuckerberg is claiming that they're going to be taking Apple to court to try suing them, that they shouldn't be able to block people. It creates an unfair advantage of people that are using stuff through their app store. So we'll see what that actually does. But I think it's interesting. It's kind of the punches and kind of turns that we need to take as advertisers, and we're willing to kind of combat it and find a new way to help scale and do great marketing for our clients, really.
Yeah, it's really interesting from a personal perspective. I think like if I received that question, the opt-in question, as a marketer, I would think for sure, I want the personalized messaging, right? That's the first thing. And the second thing is like, I know that it's helpful to have that tracking for people on the other end of the spectrum, right? But then from a privacy perspective, like, you know, it's something really important, and it's a conversation that's been going on for a long time. I agree. It's like, it has been a conversation that's been going on, and it's just a matter of when it's going to happen. And I don't think anybody really knows when it's going to happen at this point.
Right, and it's created those two trains of thoughts, like you were saying, of people that are like, you know what, I don't want them to have any of my information, don't want them to know what I'm doing, and the other people are like, well, I still want to get ads that are relevant to me. I don't want to be getting ads for cat food, and I don't even have a pet. So that's where there's the two sides of people that they enjoy actually getting ads targeted to them for products that they are actually interested in buying.
And so what would you say to people who are thinking like, okay, well, Facebook is my like number one channel. That's where I do everything, right? Like, are there other channels that I should be delving into right now to think through, like, you know, should I be breaking things out a little bit further? I had all of my eggs in one basket. What does that mean for me? Like, are you looking to optimize other channels for your clients right now? Or are you just going to help them focus on like what they can do to make Facebook work for them based on this historical data?
Yeah, so we've seen that Google is going to be a big opportunity for a lot of people. I mean, capturing search is showing people that already have intent. So that's not really going to change as much. There is some stuff on the other paid social channels, and Sarah and Trent can talk on this a little bit more. But we're seeing some of the same stuff that Snapchat, your TikToks, your Pinterest, they're going to have to go through the same kind of changes. Are they adapting as quickly? Maybe not. So maybe they'll be able to kind of get through this a little in a bit more of a gray area. And not be kind of affected as much right away, but it's going to be some on the kind of event tracking that's going to kind of affect all different platforms.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I mean, in our testing with other platforms, Facebook has, you know, definitely been our number one source of spend and where we're driving like top of funnel traffic. And I think that will continue to hold. And even with all the changes, like Facebook does seem to like really be allocating a lot of resources to how to adapt to this new model. So I think it's really just time, you know, waiting around, seeing how exactly the data is going to look. I think we'll still be able to track. I think we'll still be able to optimize. And I think like there's things like GA and, you know, other metrics we can look at to really measure if the channel is successful. And I think it still will be.
Oh, we have another question from somebody named Lee. What do you think of first-party data strategies to combat the Apple changes and reliance on Facebook, like those proposed by companies such as FOPShow.com and other independent attribution companies? Is this a good time to move to first-party data strategies and not let Facebook mark its own homework? That's a really great question.
Yeah. I mean, we are recommending all of our clients to, if they're on Shopify, to download the new Facebook app and enable CAPI. And we are also working with a partnership to develop full server-side tracking. From what we've heard, though, from Facebook is that it's still going to be regulated by the same policies. So if somebody opts out of tracking, even if you're using that data, you still wouldn't be able to feed it back into Facebook, or Facebook wouldn't be able to use it. But it's a little bit unclear still on that. And we know that the server-side tracking first-party data is going to be kind of the way of the future. And whatever we can get from Pixel or cookies, we're going to be able to get more from that. So it's definitely something that we want to be get ahead of and make sure that it's implemented, but not 100% sure if it'll be like the end all be all. We'll kind of have to see on that.
Yeah, I did touch on, I'm not familiar with FOP Show or some of these other kind of attribution softwares, but essentially what they're going to have to do, because they're going to be getting the same signals as Facebook, they're going to create their own models and kind of do some of their own kind of algorithmic kind of adjustment to be like, this is what we think is your new kind of like ROAS or different metrics. And Facebook's going to kind of come out and create their own kind of modeling. So it's kind of like, if that's something you've been working with in the past and you trust and like using those models, I'd say continue with that. But I wouldn't say to kind of jump ship and go over and switch over to something right now, just because that's going to give you different information that you won't have as much benchmarked against.
Yeah. I mean, I would totally agree with that. I think this whole thing is like an evolution. And I think like the community of both advertisers and Facebook and these like all these different platforms, they're all going to rally together to figure out like what is the next level, what is the next step here, right? Like I think it's all going to come to a point where like things will really get to a better place. It won't always be like this question mark of like what we should do, right? And I think we have to wait for the changes to happen before we actually start to see that stuff, which actually brings us to another question from Zach, where it's a great question. We sort of touched on it at the beginning. Has there been enough data to attribute a percentage to how many opt out? And with that, does the remaining data give you enough to base ad spend on?
Yeah, so I think you touched on this, where there's rumors of it being anywhere between 50%, 70% people opting out. We just don't really even know. We've seen the mock-ups of what it's going to look like to show people. Is that going to show up every time someone logs in? Is it going to happen every time someone tries clicking on an ad and gets taken off Facebook into Safari or whatever browser they're using? So it's hard to know exactly how deep it's going to go. But I think to the question about what does this do for the remaining amount of ad spend, I think that's where it's creating other models that are going to help kind of show that information, because that's not going to say that that person is going to click on an ad and go make a purchase. We just won't know within Facebook's kind of data set if they actually made that purchase. So looking at those metrics in other kind of reporting dashboards, such as a Google Analytics that is a last click model, you'll still be able to see that person because it is going to serve the ad to that. There are the other ideas, and that this is going to create an opportunity for arbitrage because people are going to stop advertising as much. And so it's going to possibly give more opportunity to lower CPMs and other areas that are going to be beneficial for advertisers that are still taking advantage. But it's hard to know. It's a lot of just kind of speculation that we're kind of doing to put that information out there for you.
Yeah, it's a really good point. More inventory, lower costs, right? And so that is a possibility, but for people who base like most of their sales on their ad spend, right? It's really tough to consider what this actually means for their business, right? So
yeah, and that's where there's other models we even talk about. So this term we use a lot around CTC is this idea of MER. So it's your marketing effective ratio. So it's almost looking at what was my ad spend for the month and what was my actual return. So looking at your end of month kind of numbers. Okay, if I spent $100,000 this month, what was my full return either in your Shopify, your WooCommerce, whatever kind of platform you're looking at, and be able to base kind of your own benchmarking of, okay, what is my advertising spend to my actual return? Am I net profit in that sense?
Right, for sure.
I feel like although it can feel very scary for advertisers, and especially like the buyers who are in the platform every day, because this is how they've been doing their job and this is how they've been measuring success, is what they see in Ads Manager. And so it's going to take a little bit of just a mindset shift of knowing that you using other means to judge your success. So like we've talked about looking at Google Analytics, last click attribution as compared to the ad spend in Facebook. So you can basically get like a Google Analytics Facebook ROAS. And if you're able to understand that, and then when the change happens, if you are losing a ton of data in Facebook, rather than pulling back spend immediately, being able to look at those other channels and look at those other areas to see, okay, is money still coming in? And if it is, and if it's still comparable to what it was before, then that's a good indicator that you're still getting the purchases. You just may not be seeing it in your ads manager.
Yeah, you're just a little bit you've less visibility, right? Into who's actually doing it. That doesn't mean it's not happening, right? And it's just that notion of personalization that you might lose at the other end, right? Where if you are retargeting somebody, you might not be able to retarget them. It's like they've gone in to buy a pair of blue shoes. You want to retarget them to buy the blue shoes. You don't know that that's what they've gone in for, right? And so that's where it makes it really hard. But again, you're totally right. Like if things remain equal and you see things across the board are kind of copacetic, then like you seem to be okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's where there's also other kind of tools. SMS, email marketing is going to become even stronger and more important. So if we're not able to do those remarketing tactics, maybe we can utilize abandoned cart flows and things like that to be able to bring them back in. While we used to be able to spend more money on the remarketing, retargeting, use those to your advantage in different ways and get kind of creative in those strategies.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think email marketing is I think it was up, and then it was, less of a thing, and now it's making a big comeback. I see this. This is like the year of email marketing, right? It's what we're all going to see. So, in the hopes that we don't get another sort of compliance situation slapped on us from the email side, I think something big. And so, what are the other like major points when people are coming to you with like their questions about this? Like, what are some other things that people are really concerned about around the iOS changes and just things they're thinking about in terms of your clients? I know from a Clearbanc perspective, like our founders are just really concerned about, like what's going to happen to their business in terms of like, will things go down, right? If they're totally reliant on the ads.
Yeah, I think one of them in platform is how we think about delay attribution, which is going to be huge. I think that's like another big change that they're making in platform, which is historically how it's been is, if you see an ad and then you purchase 3 days later, it gets reported on the day you see the ad, right? And now it's going to get reported on the day of the purchase. So it's really going to shift how we look at delay especially as we have like big moments like sales or Q4. We've always kind of banked on like, okay, we know we have all this historical data. We know going into these big moments, we can push based off this data. And now all of that historical data is going to change, and we don't yet know how that's going to look. So I think that's like another thing we're, curious to see what happens as the data shifts from a reporting purchase on time of seeing the ad versus the time of the purchase. So I think that's another interesting one.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's going to be tougher. Advertisers are going to want to pull back because they're not going to be able to understand that true delayed attribution amount. But again, it's kind of like, how are we still feeding the funnel, getting people in before these opportune moments, using those other kind of channels of email, SMS, even just kind of that organic nature of someone's coming to it beforehand, and then they're going to see an ad that is when the sale happens, when those bigger moments. So we don't miss out on those big moments that a lot of e-commerce businesses really rely on their sales, their Q4 through Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think one other thing that has been more top of mind lately is the native checkout on Instagram and Facebook, and getting that set up, because that theoretically we should be able to get all of the data because it's all done in platform. The setup process for that is still a little bit not extremely straightforward, but I have a feeling that Facebook's going to try to push that, because it is a way for them to have full visibility into the purchases.
Is that Facebook Shops?
Yes, it's there's a lot of different nomenclature that's thrown around. It's like Instagram checkout, Facebook Shops, there's product tags, it's kind of all rolled into one, but I think the biggest part of it is the ability to check out directly on platform, and then yes, going to the shops on their pages and being able to look through the different products.
I think there's just going to be a lot of different alternatives that come through, like with the changes. And I think like we're probably going to be shocked at like some of the things that people are cooking up right now, right? Like we're going to see a lot of new people coming up with really cool business ideas and different ways to navigate and work around this, in my opinion, right?
Mm.
So for those of you who just joined, please register, because we probably have some resources that we can send you at the end of this. Oh, we have one more question from Damien. I would love to learn more about recommended funnel systems. I've been using email marketing so far and dabbling in cart abandonment and funnel systems. It gets overwhelming. Any advice for Damien on how he can make it less overwhelming for himself?
Yeah, I think maybe, do you have a little bit more clarity, like specifically what you mean funnel systems?
I guess he means like the full funnel experience in terms of like his sales. Like, I would imagine that it's like, from top of funnel to bottom of funnel, like how are we getting people to the store? And then once we get them there, like how are we driving them to actually make a purchase and complete the purchase, and potentially like add more to the mix of their cart, right? Average order value, things like that.
Scott, do you have anything on this one?
Yeah, I think I was waiting for you to kind of take that trend. I thought you had something going in your mind.
I saw something. I actually saw your brain, so I'm with you, Scott.
Yeah, I think, part of it is just kind of understanding those flows of understand what your customer journeys are like. And again, we keep going back to kind of GA and Google Analytics, just because that's going to be kind of that best source of truth of what has been those paths in the past, like where are you able to convert people. So even looking at what is your breakdown, what is your conversion rate through your email funnels? How are we maybe thinking about shifting and kind of growing those differently if we do know that there's a large percentage of revenue that comes that way? And then even looking if you're using Klaviyo or Attentive, and just understanding those kind of different dashboards and where you're kind of helping drive that and how they are functioning and working together. It's just going to be super important just to get really concise with it. Again, it's going to be tougher for people, I think, that are new to the space. And I think that's the big thing that Facebook is kind of harping on, that is going to be tough and going to be really hard, and it's going to hurt the small businesses. So that's where, if you don't have as much of that historic data and you're trying to just focus on what is a good number for my email and my abandoned cart flows, and how do I help grow that and scale it. So I think that's where working with agencies or even other kind of small communities of people to be able to bounce off those ideas and benchmarks of like, okay, if I'm a new business and I get 20% of my business from email, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? How does that number stack up? Should I kind of keep pushing more, or do I need to do something about those flows to change that from a 20% to a 25 or 30%?
Yeah, and just add to that too, depending on what kind of funnel system you're looking at, is just breaking it down into smaller parts and thinking about like the specific flow and what is the percentage of people that get from A to B and B to C, and being able to see those percentages and then saying, okay, if there's where is it strongest and where is it weakest, and then working specifically on those points.
Yeah. And I think just on your point about like communities and like asking questions, like I think that's such a good like thing to talk about right now, is just like the communities and the ability to like help people, like the resources that are available. So Facebook has resources that they've actually made available. You guys have resources that you've made available, and Clearbanc has a ton of resources that we've made available as well. Like there are places that you can look to get an understanding of like what steps you should be taking right now, what steps you can take after the fact. You can join the Facebook Clearbanc for Founders group, and you can start to talk through some things, right? So there's tons of places that you can go to find like additional resources on these changes. I don't know if you guys have any specific resources that you can point some of our viewers to right now in terms of things that can help them on an immediate basis.
We have our CTC blog.
It's a great blog. You should definitely send people there. It's wonderful. Guys, go to the CTC blog. It really breaks it down for you. Clearbanc blog also has something really, really great. And I think if we didn't have any more questions, I think if you guys have any additional parting comments for any of our viewers, anything really just like positive to keep people going and let them know that like this is going to be okay.
Yeah, sure. I can take that. I did see one question from Alex Whitfield about split testing between non-iPhone users and iPhone users, and that is something that we've talked about, and being able to use the data from Android users to then inform whether or not certain ads or campaigns are working on iPhone users. So something to explore there. Again, don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but yeah. And then just in terms of how we approach the next month, next few weeks, next day, whenever this drops, is just I think embracing the uncertainty and knowing that this is not the first nor the last time that something like this is going to happen, and it's going to be okay. I don't think that social advertising is not going away. We're not going to go back to just running billboard and I don't know, like flyer ads. We're still going to be able to do this type of advertising, and it's just going to look a little different, and that's okay. And the more that you can, I think what's going to set advertisers and companies apart is their ability to adapt. And so just lean into that, and I think that you'll succeed.
Yeah. I mean, learning to adapt is essentially the foundation of e-commerce, right? Like every single person is adapting. We always have to pivot. It's almost like that's the always on for founders, right? Is like just the change and the learning and all of that stuff. So it's always going to happen. And I think it's how you react to it. And, entrepreneurs are strong, and they'll be all the better for it, I think.
Yeah, the sky isn't falling as much as people think. We're here to subscribe to our newsletter. We also have our CTC Admission community, which is a great group of founders and entrepreneurs that are looking for more information, working with our experts. Sarah, Trent, myself are always going to be putting out information. Sarah just did a great blog article that came out 2 days ago. So we want to be able to provide best-in-class information to people that are our clients, and even people that are just in our community and want to learn more, that maybe will be potential clients, or even just people that love the content we put out. So hoping to help keep growing this community, and excited about what is to come. And we know it's tough and scary. We're here to help.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for being here to provide all this information. Like Scott said, Clearbanc and CTC we're here for you during this time. So if you haven't registered, please register. We will be sending out some information, some post-event information afterwards. And if we didn't get to your question, we will absolutely send through any of the answers to your questions. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. And until next time, thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.